Hey folks, welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa, or Chris Wyatt Reports. Why is that doing that? Just a second here. I've got a strange thing. Oh, a message came through. That's why. I'm looking at my Zoom thing, and it's got something on the screen there. So, okay, cool. All right, got it. Now we're good. It's showing up on the menu down here. I want to do it. Welcome back, folks. Oh, got it. It's hanging under my beard there. How unsightly is that? Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports, the Indaba Africa channel. It is Wednesday, the 6th of April, 2022. Dumela, SouthAfrica. Hey, how's it going? Otsihilijang. Okay, nako. It is time. Let's get started, folks. One of my co-hosts here, none other than Dumo Denga. Dumo, Otsihilijang.
I am doing very well, Chris. It's always great to have this show. I mean, we know we don't do it too often, but I was really looking forward to this one. So now, great to be on again.
Well, a few things have happened since last we chatted. I think it was about a month ago, and it was just you and I, if I'm not mistaken. Today, folks, we might actually get Koketso in here, and rumor has it that the freeloader, I mean, the fourth person on the program might actually be showing up tonight. We'll hold that to see if he makes it, but the intent was to have a four-person panel for this program. It looks like we might actually get there tonight. But to our co-hosts, don't rush, be careful in traffic, watch out for carjackers, and be careful going home. And they're in a rush to get you here. But we start a little bit early because that darn Ronaldo, man, he changed his broadcast times, and we do Wednesdays with the Colonel, which would normally be at 8 p.m. South African time, but now he, it's a little past his bedtime. He can't stay awake, so you know how those elderly folks are. He has to go to bed earlier, so Ronaldo has switched that time to 7 p.m., and so I adjusted this. So I don't know if we'll stick with this time, but I have a feeling we might. So in the future, I feel it might just be Dumo and I starting off the program, and then our colleagues joining us. How's that sound, Dumo? Do you think that'll work?
Yeah, I think it'll work. I'll always try to be the first one on here, and then when they join, then they can catch the stompies, I guess.
they get the remains. What's left? I think they'll be the people in the wine barrel out there stomping on what's left of the grapes. They get to eat what's left when it's all done. But seriously, hey, look, some things to talk about. We'll obviously come back to a few of these topics after we get going and these guys join us because we want to get their views. But I do want to talk about the Public Investment Corporation, the Black Management Forum, and also the Fuel Retailers Association, all of whom I now deem as racist or race hustlers. But anyway, we'll get to that story in a little bit. But let's talk first off about the elephant in the room, and that's hippo in the room, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the recent, or maybe he's a squirrel, I'm not sure which, people call him all kinds of things. But let's talk about 25 months, and South Africa is finally ending what I've long called the certainly immoral, and I view unlawful and unconstitutional endless extension of the Disaster Management Act. The state of disaster is officially over as of midnight a day ago, and it has a transition period, which some people have read the act and say they see nothing in there that gives them the authority to do that. I haven't read it fully, so I'm not fully informed on that, and I've been busy, too busy to read it. So it's over a transition period, which the government claims it has 30 days to keep some measures in place, like facial coverings, yada, 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 restrictions on indoor stuff, wearing facial masks. But it's not really over so much. I've been warning people about this since Cyril Ramaphosa first discussed this over a month ago and mentioned what might come in the future. It seems like the ANC is trying to put lockdown into the law and make it a permanent law. And before I give you a chance to get in there, the one piece disturbing to me is that with the changes they propose for the law, which is being gazetted right now, and they've got public comment coming in, please go inundate your government about this, South Africa. There is a piece in there that says that arrivals in South Africa can be held and detained for suspicion of infection or pathogen of any sort, influenza, HI. It doesn't say that specifically, but basically it's any pathogen, not just the Rona. That disturbs me. That means that at any time in the future, some petty little Durko immigration official at Tlokwane, when I drive across from Botswana, who doesn't like what I had to say, will say, okay, put him in a room. We have to detain him for 12 days and test him for these. There's all kinds of potential abuse here. Anyway, my point is that they want to put this stuff into law. So lockdown isn't going away. The pandemic hasn't disappeared or the excuse for it. They're simply just trying to make it part of law. Have I missed something? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's 110% correct on that. I think what they want to do is make this lockdown thing more perpetual, because if they keep extending the state of the disaster, at some point someone can take this to court, and then the court will have to say, listen, you have to end it. So remember, the reason why they ended it the other day, it's not because they wanted to.
No.
It was because they were going to be challenged in court on the 5th. And what happened was they knew that if they went to court, they were going to lose, and they're going to look less legitimate. So therefore, they ended it. And now this transition period, from what I've read, it's a bunch of BS. Basically, in a nutshell, there is no law that supports what they're doing right now. Zero. And the ANC knows this. They know that. I know this. I think Section 27 of that act, of the Disaster Management Act, it gives off the impression that, look, the government can institute things that can make like the relief better or something like that. But it's not necessarily rules. They can implement things like, let's say, a fund that will help people that got
like the SASA grant or something like that.
Right. That's what it means. But that's how it can be interpreted. But I think because of that gray area, that what the ANC did, they took advantage of the ambiguity of that section, and as a result of taking advantage of that, they know very well that they can get taken to court. But remember, they know that if someone wants to take them to court on this, it'll be a waste of time because of the fact that it'll only be heard in 2 months from now. So they know they can take advantage of that. Then, obviously, they want to implement these regulations, put them in the law, and once they put them in the law, you know what happens from there. Then they make this thing more permanent. Now, I don't know. I think for me, if any other civil organization wants to challenge this, they're probably going to have to wait until it's implemented, and then probably not wait until, but once they see the final regulations, they can actually challenge that in court. Similar to the ARTO Act. So remember the amendments that they wanted to make to the ARTO Act, AARTO. Sorry about that. They wanted this was also taken to court as well, and it was declared unconstitutional. Because I mean, one of the things that they wanted to implement in that ARTO Act was that they wanted to. They said that if you got too many demerit points, they could suspend your license or revoke it or anything like that, and they felt that was unconstitutional. So I think probably, I don't know law that much, but I think that's the route, right? Rather wait for the final regulations, and then you go to court based on that. And then I think for me, given that may work. Or it could go down the routes of ETOL. They lose. Let's say we lose. But then ultimately, in the nutshell, people are just not going to implement it. So even the border guys may just be like, what the hell? Let this guy in. We don't care. So I think that's how it is. But I think what the ANC, they just want to make this permanent. But they can only go as far as people are willing to make it permanent. And I think at some point, even the corporates and the small businesses are just going to not comply.
Well, it's quite disturbing, isn't it, Dumo? I mean, whether it's in South Africa or it's here in the United States, these governments know they're violating existing law, and the Constitution. I mean, Biden does it on a daily basis almost. He's doing things that are beyond his remit. He doesn't have the authority to do the things he's doing. I mean, here's just a few things that they've tried to accomplish here in the States under Biden. They tried to force all employers with more than 100 employees to get mandatory jabs around the country, which would have affected nearly 100 million workers in this country. Now, the way they did it was the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is responsible for making sure that, working conditions are safe, that 12-year-olds aren't working meat packing plants, that, that buildings don't have asbestos in them, and that people have safety measures in place. That's their role. They took that organization and they illegally, unconstitutionally mandate a rule which doesn't have the weight of law, and they tried to get away with it. Meantime, tens of millions of Americans who opposed getting a jab were forced to get a jab, or they would lose their job. This, of course, went to court. By the time that it was thrown out by the Supreme Court, tens of millions of Americans had involuntarily been jabbed against their will. So that was the first. That was one of them. They also put in a mandate for defense contractors, which is a role I frequently fulfill now as a retiree. I work for firms that provide services to the Department of Defense, and they tried to say that defense contractors had to be jabbed. Well, whether I have a jab or not, it's my business, and I don't think it's appropriate for them to tell me I have to show them my jab to walk into a building here in my own country. I haven't walked into another country. My philosophy on that is a health official in an incoming country has the right and prerogative to ask me for my yellow fever status, for my vaccination status. I don't have a problem with that because you're a sovereign state. But I'm inside a sovereign state, and no one has the authority to do that inside the sovereign state. Anyway, so with the federal contractors, that was set aside in November. They said all federal contractors must be jabbed or they can't work for the federal government. This was thrown up by the Supreme Court. And there's several more. Federal employees have been forced to be jabbed. That's been thrown out. The only one that stands is the military, because military under different status. You surrender many of your rights to serve in uniform, even though it's voluntary. And so that one's not going to be thrown out. But some of the conduct by the services might be challenged in court. But the point is that the Biden administration did one unconstitutional thing after another. They knew they were unconstitutional, but they did it to coerce people, and they got what they wanted. And the same thing is happening in South Africa. They know that the the State of Disaster Act was not intended to be carried into perpetuity. It was meant for an earthquake or a tsunami on the east coast of Durban. A tsunami comes in, wipes out Durban. It's a state of disaster. It takes a couple of months to get it sorted. So you extend it from 1 month, extend it for 2 months. Okay, after 3 or 4 months, things are returning to normal. You can reduce it. You no longer need to do that. But they have extended this for 25 months immorally, and I argue unconstitutionally, illegally. They have violated the trust of South Africans, and they are a disgrace to the country. And I guess that's all I can say about the ANC. Well, no, I can say a lot more.
You're right. They are a disgrace. I mean, even on was it Monday when when Ramaphosa made his speech on ending the state of disaster. I mean, the condescending tone of this thing, and also like, oh, we're ending the state of the disaster, but the regulations that made the core of the state of the disaster, we're still going to keep them in for 30 days, And what was also very shocking was like when I saw other people talking about this, and they were like, yeah, it's over. And I was like, no, it's not. Like,
it's just beginning.
it's just beginning. And, many people are unaware really of what's actually in the Health Act amendments. And Koketso, who is not here right now, and I don't want to steal his shine, and he might even say this, but I'm going to just say it anyway, but I'm going to give credit to him, is that he said we must not focus on what Cyril is saying. We must focus on what he is not saying.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So if you look at the health, the amendments that they want to put in place, I mean, you can get detained for refusing to take the jab. You can, if you refuse to take the jab, you can actually be denied healthcare and a lot of other services and stuff like that. They did not mention that in any of the speeches, and they're going to sneak it in. And then when people realize what's actually happening, they'll be like, oh my word, it's too late now. And this is the problem that I have, is that, that's why I tell folks, like, just be aware of like what's going on. Don't just rely on the state. And as a libertarian, I always say this, the best rule to have against the state is to always assume that when they tell you something, that they're lying. When they say things like, even if it does sound reasonable, just assume that they're lying. And if you're proven wrong, you can say, okay, I'm wrong. My bad, right?
But how often is that going to happen? Not very often that you're wrong. But I mean, isn't it ironic, Dumo, that the very people in Canada, the very people in South Africa, the very people in America who run around with what I argue is a foolish claim that healthcare is a human right. It's not a human right. God doesn't give us hospitals and EKGs and sonar. None of that stuff comes from God. That's created by man. We create a system to treat ourselves, protect ourselves. So it's not a human right. But these same people claim it's a human right, then deny that human right to people because they don't get a jab that was tested for 7 months before it was given to people. Seriously?
Exactly.
What the?
There you go.
What happened to my body, my choice?
Exactly. They just threw it out the window. Bye-bye. Just gone, just like that.
I mean, honestly, 3 years.
Yeah.
No Rona. 3 years. Been all over the U.S. No Rona. Here I am. I'm still alive. Remember, this this winter of death and misery for the jab, or for the unjab, excuse me. So whether I've been jabbed or not, I'm not going to say. But the bottom line is I haven't had Rona, whether I got jabbed or not. So, what are you all panicking over here for? The death and misery. I'll tell you what. I'm feeling more alive than I did on January 1st because now I see that Joe is just going to put his foot in it. Anyway, so, it's just crazy. Yeah, we got some questions in the chat. Let me bring them in real quick so I'm not ignoring the audience because you and I could talk all day. So okay, so there's a couple in here. Michael Holmes had one. Oh, he's got a couple of them. Let's go with the second one. He wants to know what our take on the new SAPS commissioner is. And the one before that is what's your take on how they should prosecute the tender corruption? State capture report said SA should create anti-tender corruption. No, South Africa should not create an anti-tender corruption agency. The Department of Justice should hire competent prosecutors and hire investigators that are capable of doing investigations. And SAPS should be equipped with forensic experts, and the money should be spent on that instead of blue light escorts to get DNA processing, to get fingerprint processing, to get physical evidence collection and storage taken care of, the chain of custody. That's what should happen. They don't need another agency for patronage to put more people in. They simply need to prosecute the crimes that exist. I mean, listening to stories about, people going to trial and they show up for a farm murder case. I read this story and the prosecutor has 4 cases thrown in his lap and he says, okay, what's your case? He doesn't even know the case he's about to prosecute. And then the murderers get off scot-free. It's ridiculous. So you got to make the system exist work. Creation new stuff doesn't. The only thing I would argue for coming back is something I was against in the beginning, and that's the Scorpions. That's the only thing I'd argue for coming back, but even that I'm stuck on. So prosecution of tender corruption, and then the new SAPS commissioner. New SAPS commissioner to me is whatever. Okay, go ahead, Dumo. It's your turn.
Yeah, I want to start with the prosecution stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think this setting up of a new agency is just typical of government. So, whenever they want to fix a problem, they're going to create this industry or a ministry that is designed, and I'll say designed in quote unquote designed to assist in alleviating that. And obviously that doesn't work. That's just another way to get more cadres into the government paybook and everything like that.
Patronage.
There we go, the patronage network. So I think that's one thing. It's not going to serve the purpose, and I agree with you. What we just need to do is get the NPA to get people that are capable of actually managing the case. But unfortunately, the consistency of the NPA is not that great. I think if you saw with I forgot this girl's name. Her surname was Mani, Mani, Mani. The girl who. Let's call it the NSFAS girl. The NSFAS girl who got 14 million and she just got sentenced to 5 years in jail. People are complaining, saying that, well, look, okay, we see her, she's going to jail. But what about the ministers and, the ANC guys that are also have got charges against them? And I think they raise a great point there. But they must also understand that the NPA stands for the No Prosecutions Authority as well. So when it comes to that, really, the reality is that, look, the ANC is going to protect their own. If anyone gets prosecuted, it's going to be because they don't want that person, or because that person may serve as a political threat to the ANC in some way, so getting prosecuted. But the ones who are not prosecuted, they're good. I mean, look at Zuma. I mean, every time he goes to court for his corruption charges, it always gets postponed. So
Malema.
Exactly. So the reality is that the NPA is not going to do anything. I don't think they will, but any small fry, definitely, those guys are going to get hit hard.
Yeah, they're always going to protect them. I mean, look, Ace Magashule, we're talking about winning his premiere of the Free State years ago now, and he's yet to go to trial for this ridiculous thing. Julius Malema, of course, he's a convenient foil for the ANC, so the racist and race hustlers in the ANC can use him and trot him out when they want, and he's no threat to the ANC. They think he is, but he's not, so he's there. But nothing happens to him. But what about Zandile Gumeda? Well, not only is she removed as the mayor of eThekwini for her corruption there, and it was pervasive corruption. I mean, the guilt. If she's innocent, I'll fall over like a leaf. That's just no way. But so she's removed, and then they surreptitiously stick her in as a member of the provincial legislature so she gets a paycheck. Until independent journalists like myself, and I don't know if you guys covered Man Patriot, you might have done as well, brought out loud and screamed, what the hell is going on here? This woman is charged with corruption, and the only reason she's not in jail is because they've failed to hold a trial yet. And now you're putting the provincial legislature? How do you do that? Besides, the ANC has a step-aside rule. How can you do this? And because of the uproar, and then actually I'll give credit to News 24, one of the few times they deserve it, they actually were loud on this too and brought it up, and so did Daily Maverick. And that uproar meant that she was suspended, I guess, but she's still in the provincial legislature, still drawing a paycheck. And everyone's excited about digital vibes and Zelinsky Mkhize, he was removed. No, he wasn't. He was sacked as the health minister, but he still sits in parliament. I saw that jackass vote when I watched it. I watched it live last week when they were voting on the no confidence motion. He covered his face covered up and he had the camera off. Mkhize, turn the camera on. Now remove the mask so we can see it's actually you voting. He still is drawing a paycheck because he wasn't voted for by the people. He was appointed by the ANC. They'll never take these people out. They'll never. I mean, the ANC is so twisted and sick that the Mpumalanga conference elected an accused murderer as the treasurer in absentia. He wasn't even at the conference, and he won overwhelmingly, over 420 votes for this clown who's accused of murder. Now, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe he's innocent, but that really doesn't matter. The party has a step-aside rule. When you're accused or you're charged with a crime, you step aside and suspended until it's resolved. He's already fired as the agricultural minister in Mpumalanga, and then he gets elected. These people are demented, absolutely demented. And this is the same party that supported Jeffrey Donson, a convicted pedophile child rapist who raped a girl when he was mayor of Kanalan, and they supported him becoming mayor along with his deputy who's convicted fraudster who's wearing an ankle bracelet who can't leave his home. This is the angry, naughty children. How anybody can vote for these people is beyond comprehension unless you're a cadre or a cadre wannabe looking to suckle on that teat. Ugh.
Exactly. I think you summed it up very well. And that step aside rule, I never took it seriously. It was just there as I think a PR stint, basically. They were just saying that, look, we are doing something, but obviously in the background, they do nothing. So it's always like that. You tell the media one thing, and then behind closed doors, you do another thing. So, the step, I remember I saw someone, ranting about the step aside thing as well. And I was just like, yeah, do you really think the ANC is really going to prosecute people in their own party? They're not going to allow it. And I just think at some point, this is why I say maybe 2024 might be the turning point. But if ANC gets less than 50% in 2024, it's going to be a very interesting time because the way the president will be elected, because remember, I think after the elections, then the president has to kind of be affirmed by parliament. And if it's less than 50%, hey, the president might not even come from the ANC.
Exactly.
And if the president comes from another party, that's going to be interesting because that person can select who's the head of the NPA. They select the new judges, everything like that. So that's going to be a very interesting time. Look, we'll have to wait till 2024. But I think until then, that's when we can probably see some sort of change happening in South Africa. But until then, what'll be very scary if they do get less than 50% and they'll need like the DA or Action SA and stuff like that. It's gonna be a very interesting time because I've just got a feeling that they might even start covering their tracks and everything like that. So if they get prosecuted, at least then they can get the minimum sentence.
Yeah, I think that really with the ANC, what we've seen here over the past 20 years is the implementation of things for show purposes. They create things that they think, we're fobbing off the public while we're busy stealing and enriching ourselves in the background and living high off the hog. That's the bottom line. The step aside rule was done under pressure because so many ANC politicians were implicated in crimes. Okay, we'll put this in. And they figured that's enough. We've announced it and then people just move on because people do move on. Honestly, how can anybody vote for the ANC in Nelson Mandela Bay? Are you high? Sewage running in the streets. Anybody in the Eastern Cape vote for the ANC with the abysmal children dying in pit latrines. Now we see 15 toddlers and infants starved to death, and we have tens of thousands of kids in Eastern Cape who are suffering acute malnutrition. And why? Look, I'm not, me, I'm a small government person. It's not the role of government to feed people, but the government allocated money to the social department in Port Elizabeth to feed these kids. And they turned back 67 million rand while children starved to death. This is unacceptable. In Northwest Province, the national budget sent to Northwest Province was 57.4 billion rand. They didn't spend 17 billion rand. It's going back to the national treasury. There are potholes everywhere in Northwest. There are people hungry. There's no electricity. There's people living in tin shacks. It is disgraceful. It is absolutely disgraceful. They fob people off with the step-aside rule. I think probably in the beginning, the Scorpions, even if there was good intent, they thought, well, it'll just get rid of the gangsters or this and that. But when it started going after ANC politicians, then it had to go away. Then it had to go away. All of these steps, look at the perfect example is Zuma. Zuma finally says, I'll point at corruption. We'll go after the Zondo Commission to look for corruption. Yeah, because you thought it wouldn't do anything. You just did it to announce it. You never knew it would come after you. Got a little bit of buyer's remorse there, Jacob Zuma. A little bit of buyer's remorse, I think. He wants to take that combi back to the shop because he doesn't like that combi. He wants a Range Rover.
Exactly. Right.
What about the police commissioner, the new police commissioner? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I heard he's a cader, so
of course. So
I just think, we'll get more of the same. The previous one, what is his surname again? Was it Sithole? If I'm not mistaken.
It was Sithole, yeah.
Yeah, Sithole. So Sithole, I think what he said one thing that I think that red pilled me quite a bit, shockingly enough. And he said the one time, he said the police has become an all-purposes agency, and he's like, we don't have enough resources to fulfill our mandate. And that is probably the only time the government or anyone from the government was telling the truth. The reality is that, if you look at the police in this country, they are under-resourced, understaffed and everything like that. A lot of people suggest that we should have a federalized system. Perhaps that could work. But even in that situation, right? Well, not in that, in our current situation, rather. In our current situation, the problem is just that the police, they virtually non-existent. I speak to security guards, and security guards tell me, what police? They'll say to me, they'll be like, Dumo, here there's no police.
Exactly.
In this country, there's no police. We don't have a police here. And basically, a friend of mine even said, the police are there just to create dockets. So crime scene comes, they collect the dockets, and that's it. They just create a case number. That's all they're good for. Really. Emergencies, they're not good. They don't respond that well. I heard in some situations where you'll phone the police and they'll say things like, I don't have a car. We don't have a car.
Right.
So you have to come pick us up. Right. I remember the one time when
but my car was just carjacked.
Exactly.
So I can't come get you. Take an Uber.
I remember when I went to the police, because I had to make an insurance claim the one time. Right. And I went to Norwood police station. Because my car got broken into at a certain place. And I asked them, hey, it happened on this date. I was told that this detective is on it. Can I please have the case number? You know what they told me? They said that, no, we can't get the case number. I'm like, no, but here it is. Here's the incident. It happened at this thing. Here it is. Here's everything. All I need is the case number. And they just said, no, sorry, we can't help you then. I'm like, this is how useless they are. And then that same police station, I think the station manager resigned after news broke out that 1,600, a lot of firearms went missing. And you know what? I know what they did with those firearms. They sold them to gangsters. Yeah. So, this is what it is. Like, the police are corrupt. They're under-resourced. Yeah. It's over. You really hope,
and it really doesn't matter anyway, because even if you have honest, legitimate police who do the collection of forensic, say it's a farm attack or a cash and transit heist or a home invasion, they do the forensic work, they put the DNA in, they put the fingerprints in, they turn the physical evidence in, it'll just disappear. It'll be a backlog. It won't be done. If they get around to prosecuting it, they'll bring some prosecutor who's overworked, who has 15 cases. He handed a docket before he goes in, doesn't even know what the case is about, and then pleads it down, and then some violent criminal gets no time or time served. By the way, who's in jail for the murder of Brendan Horner? Nobody. But the gentleman who went there, who was accused of domestic terrorism, apparently is one of the guys that flipped over the vehicle that was in Senecal on the 6th of October. He's in jail. He got a 10-month sentence. He's in jail.
Look at that.
But the person who tortured and murdered in a racial assassination of Brendan Horner is named. The murder of Edward Neumeister in KZN, the Austrian immigrant who'd been in South Africa for 50 years, had a restaurant there, which was closed because of COVID, but it didn't stop an attacker from murdering him and butchering him with a panga. He was mortally wounded, and when the guy went inside the restaurant, the kitchen, which was closed, but his partner was in there cooking, and when he went for the partner, the guy was mortally wounded with blood spurting out from his armpit, and a fatal wound. He struggles, 68 years of age, back up the steps into the kitchen and lunges at the murderer so that she can escape. And of course, he's just butchered. no one arrested in that case. And I could go on the list and listen. At least we've got the murder of Sefatso Pule. We've got her. Yeah, we got that one. And we got the murder of the young lady at UCT, who went to pick up her package and he raped and bludgeoned her to death. Yes. But I mean, that's rare. That's very rare. And those two were I'll tell you, the only two reasons those cases resolved because they were stunningly attractive young black women. That's the only reason. And in Sefatso Pule's case, she was 9 months pregnant, so it's particularly egregious. Yeah, but I mean, but this happens horrifically every day, and there's no prosecution. So even if we had honest cops who were capable, which there are some of, it doesn't matter. The system is stacked against South Africans, and the ANC doesn't care. That's the bottom line. It's more about them enriching themselves, enriching the cadre, than it is about delivering service and safety to South Africans, and that's horrific.
Right, it is horrific, and I just hope South Africans can just see this, because now there's this loyalty that people have towards the ANC because of 1994, and they'll keep voting for them because, hey, it's like, to them, it's like a brand. And I just think at some point, people are just going to have to just say, listen, man, like, these guys aren't useful. They're not useful at all.
It's, and it's even unjust. I mean, the ANC doesn't even deserve that credit for 94. I mean, first off, they started an internal civil war against the IFP and KZN, the People's War. I mean, they murdered tens, thousands of people in necklacing and stabbings and shootings in KZN, and then blamed it on security services. There were a few elements in security services who stoked that internal internecine fighting and played a role, but that was not the creation of the apartheid state security service. That was the creation of the ANC exclusive. They showed their true face in KwaZulu-Natal in an effort to destroy the Zulu based Inkatha Freedom Party. And it's worked. And now we see, sadly, the IFP teaming up with the ANC. What the hell is wrong with them? I mean, in eThekwini, they abandoned the coalition that would have kept the ANC out of power and would have made Durban a better and safer town. So they sided with the ANC in the end. So the ANC is back in control. And now for the no confidence motion, look, there are 14 seats in parliament, would not have changed the outcome of the vote. But in my view, the IFP is on the wrong side of history. It's not on the side of the angels when they voted to keep the cabinet in place. This corrupt, inept cabinet should be gone. And it wasn't going to happen with the IFP, but the fact that they voted for the ANC, they should have at least abstained, something. But no, they voted no. And that's, I find, I don't know if it's a sin that can't be forgiven, but it's certainly a sin that needs to draw attention. Very disappointing performance by the IFP.
Yeah, and even them, I also had some confidence in them, but it just seems to me that IFP's, it's another ANC light, I guess. So, they might as well just join the ANC, really, to be honest.
Well, I mean, look, one patronage, ingratiating party joined the crowd, and that, of course, that was the National Party. The new National Party became part of the ANC. They joined it. They became part of it. Let me get a couple comments in here as Koketso joins us. The first one here, a couple. Hey, Koketso. The first one is from Gerrit Janssen van Rensburg. He's got a couple here. I don't want to miss this here. Let me get back here.
He's a serial commenter.
Yeah, he is a serial commenter today, but there's a couple in here that were really good that I want to get to. Is it here? Okay, I'm sorry. The chat went up while I was distracted there. Oh, here it is. Yeah, this is a good one here. So Gerrit Janssen van Rensburg said the concern is that the ANC will be in positions of power in all departments. And see, that's what we had during the Trump administration. Trump was president, but the bureaucracy actively sabotaged his administration. Not everyone, not the entire 1.4 million people that work for the federal government, but a fair portion of them actively, especially people in positions of power who felt that they had the right to do that because Donald Trump was wrong, undermined our foreign policy, undermined domestic policy. And even if there's a coalition government in 2024, or even if some other party somehow magically got a majority, which isn't going to happen, it wouldn't matter in many respects because the people running the departments are still ANC cadres, many of them. And we saw this already in Johannesburg where people were being sacked and they went to court claiming they couldn't be sacked because, anyway, it's just, so that's a concern. That was one from Gerrit. And the other one was a comment from Gerrit about the new police commissioner is retirement age in plus or minus 11 months. I don't think that's germane. I believe in that position. The government has the authority, kind of like a 4-star general, to extend that person in that position beyond a retirement age. I'm not 100% correct on that, but anyway, so Koketso, welcome. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, straight from the traffic right into the show. Good to be here. Sorry, I'm late.
straight from one pile of crap right into another pile of crap, into the topics we're talking about today. So welcome. I'm glad you made it. You weren't carjacked, no traffic accidents. Those are 2 successes. Every day you got to count each success, right? So Koketso, there you go. So we were talking, we started this thing out talking about the state of disaster because Dumo and I got an early start on this. So there's some other topics I want to talk about later on, like the Public Investment Corporation, the Black Management Forum, and then the Fuel Retailers Association, all of whom I now consider to be race hustlers, but we'll get to that before we wrap up. But the state of disaster, since you're just walking in the door, if you want to give us any thoughts or comments on that, Doom and I are kind of equal agreement that it's not really the end of the state of disaster. It's simply, old wine in new bottles. They are trying to promulgate regulations and rules, which actually go beyond what they're doing now, so they can use the law to punish anyone at any time. And really, it's just a way of changing what they're doing and getting away with it. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to be said on that state of disaster, firstly, but I think one thing that we should actually take active note of is how, the media messaging is really that the state of disaster has come to an end. And yet again, we are seeing an example where nothing is being questioned. The president got on, makes an announcement, says a few things, and then walks off without any interaction with the media. The same media, of course, that have let him get away with this. But I would have honestly loved to see questions being put forward. You call it clarification, if you will, but there's a lot of questions around this. How the basic one being that how can you actually enable or put out new laws under the state of disaster while at the same time ending the state of disaster? How is that even legally possible? You can't just pronounce that for 30 days we're going to do ABC under the state of disaster while at the same time ending the state of disaster a couple of hours later. Again, I'm no legal mind, but that seems to be exactly what's been done. And I would have loved to see some form of questioning from the media around that. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it would be too far from the truth if you make your own conclusion that the media was probably briefed beforehand on what the president is going to say, and also given something like a media pack on the kind of messaging and narrative to run all their stories with in the days coming after that. Certainly, it seems like that's exactly what's happened. Everyone is coming out telling us to celebrate the end of the state of disaster, but at the same time, much of the state of disaster's rules, regulations, etc., remain in place. So it's come to an end in name only, and it's been presented as really a return to normalcy somewhat, but it's not a return to normalcy because we still have to live under the boot of the state laws that have actually been put out in the name of the pandemic. Which we know has been poorly managed by this country, firstly. And secondly, this poor management, they are trying to perpetuate it going forward with laws that apply outright, whether there's a pandemic or not. So there's a lot to be asked, and I would have loved to see the media ask these questions. But I'm like everyone else, I'm just waiting on the sidelines to see what actually happens with these amendments to the Public Health Act that everyone is basically keeping a close eye on, basically.
Well, yeah. Dumo and I spoke for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I think in 90 seconds you encapsulated pretty much everything we said there. Well done. Brevity is the sauce of clarity. No, that was well said, Koketso. I agree with you. But I'm reticent since you arrived a bit later from work. Darn those people at work. They're always messing up our schedules. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say Otsihili-jang. Eh?
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And you didn't ask me, but Kitsahili. Anyway, so it's crazy stuff, crazy stuff. And by the way, rumor has it, because I got him in the WhatsApp group for us now, that Nzuzo might be joining us here. We've never had him on the program, but he gets free advertising on the banner every time, so maybe he'll join us. We'll see. Anyway, but he did say he'd try to pop in, so hopefully he'll join us. And if we get in here, we'll have to introduce him to the audience, because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with him. Is he an attorney? I got the impression he's an attorney from something he said. He is an attorney. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Maybe we can get his voice in some of these things. But, I'm about to write a story, gents. I think I've mentioned this to you before. In Zerus, which has they've renamed the municipality. I have a hard time keeping up with that, so my apologies. But in Zerus, Northwest Province, which I'm very familiar with, during the elections in 2020, there was a party there, the Forum for Democrats, a locally generated party in Northwest Province that ran for office, and they didn't get any seats. So they were a little disappointed. But then Michael Atkins, who's an independent election analyst, looked at results from a number of places, and he came across that one. And he noticed that in the proportional representation in the second round, the Independent Electoral Commission had erroneously given the EF 191 votes when they had received just 19. So that meant that they were awarded a seat that they did not earn. So Michael Atkins discovered this because, the IEC, which tells you have 48 hours as a party to respond to the results, but didn't publish them until 96 hours after the election. So that's kind of impossible for you to respond. They published them 4 days after the election, and Michael Atkins a couple days later responded, and they ignored him. So he contacted the party involved and said, hey, did you guys know? Because it's kind of an esoteric thing. I mean, who's going to sit around and go, okay, ward here, and look at the votes, and it is implausible. If you're not a political wonk, you wouldn't know this, but he is. So he looked at it, and he said, hey, did you know that you guys probably should have gotten a seat on the council in the second round of proportional representation? They're like, no. So they looked at it, and they had their attorneys look at it, and then they sent a letter to the IEC, and the IEC said, you waited too long. Foot-sec, screw you. You waited too long. Now, to me, that's perverting the desires of the voters. That's subverting the will of the voting public. So I became aware of it, and I reached out to an attorney that I know in South Africa who put me in touch with another attorney in South Africa, and we discussed, and he said, I know a new civil rights organization called the Freedom and Advocacy Network, FAN. They might be interested. They haven't had a case. They're just about 6 months old, but this might be their first case. So I hosted a Zoom session. So here I am interfering in South African elections. I hosted a Zoom session with the attorneys, with the civic rights group, with the party involved, and with the analysts. And everyone agreed that, yeah, something's wrong here. Something needs to be done. And the FAN took forward the action. They wrote a letter through their attorney to the IEC. And son of a gun, once you get a letter from an attorney, the IEC responds. And they said, we went back and looked at it. In fact, you were correct. There was an error on our part. Now, I'm not saying it was malicious or was intentional. That really isn't germane. But this was in December. On December 16th or 17th of last year, the IEC wrote to the city municipality and said there was an error, and their EFF counselor who's sitting in that seat is not supposed to be in that seat, and it's not valid. This party and this person's supposed to be sitting there. Please swear them in. Well, they're not sworn in yet. So they took an urgent case to the court. They won the case, even though they got a 2-week delay to give the EFF and others at the municipality a chance to respond. And in late March, the decision was reached, I think 25th, I have to check, 25th, 26th, the decision was reached by the court that they must install this member, the Forum for Democrats, in that seat in Zerus. And they haven't installed the person yet. They're defying the court order. Now, is that incompetence? Possibly, but we're talking about now going on 2 weeks since the decision was reached. We're in the second week now. So the IEC makes these mistakes all the time. And unless you're a large, loud, well-funded, and resourced with attorneys party, they're going to ignore you. This bodes very poorly for independent candidates in the coming election, and also for small parties like this. But the bottom line is that I'm going to write an article on this very soon for publication in South Africa because I'm tired of this nonsense. They've been given more than adequate time. The people have been misrepresented by a party that didn't earn a seat for when they sat the council was in November, right, or December. So December, January, February, March, April. Now 5 months. 5 months, they've not had representation of the person they elected to that office. And anyway, so I thought I'd share it with you guys real quick. Any thoughts about that? Did I tell you this story before? If not, if I told it to you before, I certainly didn't give you this update because this is all new.
Yeah, first time hearing this story.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I when I'm not as busy interfering in elections in Palestine, I'm doing it in South Africa. So.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Why am I not surprised that this is like how this is developing and court order being defied, everything like that? Look, I just hope they just reach a resolution very soon, but they have to do it quickly. This thing has been. I mean, the IEC confirmed that, look, we did make an error. Yep. And now they're not doing anything, and that's a problem. So, yeah, there needs to be pressure applied on them.
Well, the EFF's argument is that, well, you waited too long. Waited too long. As soon as they're aware of it, they sent a letter. An analyst informed the IEC 3 days after they released the results, and they ignored him because he's not from the government. And so rather than taking something public, which was valid, they just ignored it. That's the proximate cause for why this thing has taken so long. And then the IEC corrected the situation in December. So the EFF didn't even respond in December. They ignored it, hoping it would go away. And now their argument to the court was that, well, this party waited too long. It's our seat. No. Possession isn't 9/10 of law when it comes to electoral law, brother. That's just not the way it works. Koketso, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Zerus is close to my heart. It's basically the town Zerus. There's the town that is the nearest town to both the villages where my parents are from. So when I go home, I'm effectively going to the Zerus area pretty much. I have to go through Zerus town. It's where my mother gets groceries and fills up her car, etc., etc. She's retired right now. My father's joining her soon. So yeah, so I think I have a little bit more skin in the game in terms of that. And I can tell you now that people in Zerus are the kind of people who they won't wait too long before they decide to yet again blockade the N4 highway, which is one of the main arteries that the main road arteries into Botswana. So yeah, if this boiling kettle, if the water starts spilling over, then yeah, expect to see some form of protest, in which case you will then see cameras coming in and reporters coming in to report on exactly what you're mentioning right now. And this will be yet another case where some level of violence or disruption to ordinary life has to happen before the state does anything about it, or before media applies pressure on the state to do anything about it too. But like Dumo said, am I surprised? No, I'm not. There's a lot of incompetence at all levels of state, even Chapter 9 institutions such as the Independent Electoral Commission. You've got guys there who are working, drawing salaries. They don't take their job seriously. They're not there because they want to do a job. They're there because, you got to do something, right, to get an income. And that's why they're there. They don't take their job seriously. And that's why when discrepancies are even put forward to them, they don't even want to take the time of day to really follow up on it. Of course, things quickly change when there's an attorney's letter coming in saying, if you don't do this, then I have legal grounds to sue you over it, in which case someone's going to get fired for negligence, I guess. But yeah, am I surprised? No. Am I glad that someone, especially, be it someone abroad or even locally, is taking up the cause? Yes, I'm glad, because it's just a reminder that it does take honest, genuine people, citizens, non-citizens, etc., to take the government to task. They don't self-regulate themselves for the greater good that they claim they do. It always takes someone who's basically paying more attention than they think that person is, and that's how we find ourselves here. So yeah, looking forward to your article, I guess.
Well, thanks a lot, and thank you for a very fine comment, very kind comments. I appreciate that. But it's ironic. There's a good chance, Koketso, that I may have been shopping shoulder to shoulder with your mom. I mean, I frequently stopped in Zerus between Gaborone and Pretoria or Rustenburg. I often stopped there to get stuff on that main drag in town if she shopped there. So we might have been standing in the queue together at some point in Zerus. Yeah, it's not a particularly visually appealing town as far as architecture and that sort of thing, but I find the people there, well, I mean, they're Botswana, so they're cool. But I find the people there to be just, it's a warm place. The only time I feel unwelcome there is when I'm driving out on the Bakwena Highway and there's a SAPS road stop to shake people down for bribes. But most of the time I've done that trip, I'd say about 95% of the trips I've taken is when I had diplomatic status and I had diplomatic plates. So I basically on footsec, you can't, you're not shaking me down. Okay, moving on, next person.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about. That's an interesting drive. I like that drive, although sometimes it seems long, sometimes it seems like it goes pretty fast, going from Zerus past Swartrugens, Groot Mariko on to Rustenburg. But the favorite part for me is that when I'm coming back from Pretoria and I approach Zerus, I know that I'm getting closer to where I'm headed to. It's it's kind of like getting to destination. And the opposite direction for me, it's always exciting when I get to the Royal Bafokeng exit where the stadium's at there. As you come up the hill there, and you've got Elephant's Neck or something like that, and you've got the ridge line on the side from the Mahalisburg. That's one, and that's actually the wallpaper that's on behind us on the broadcast right now. That's what that image is. Of course, I was driving, so I won't admit to having held a camera up and take a picture while I was driving, but that could have been possible. That might be how that picture was taken. But anyway, all right. So just saying. Yeah, no, it's an interesting place, and the Botswana people, that, Koketso, I have a special affinity for those folks. It's whether they're in Botswana or South Africa. I just feel bad for those trapped in South Africa. They could have been part of Botswana if only things had been different.
Yeah, hint Dumo. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it would have been better for them.
Look, he said, "Yeah, get rid of them. They should have been in Botswana."
I wish I was there.
Well, Dumo, I've never asked you. What is if you're willing to share? I mean, if it's personal, you don't have to share. But I mean, what's your ethnic background? I don't know.
No, both my parents are Xhosa, so my dad's from the from the Eastern Cape. My mom's from here, from Gauteng.
Okay, okay. So I didn't know that. I mean, I couldn't get it from the name. Denga looks like a DRC name to me, so it threw me off. No, it does. It looks like a DRC name. It's anyway.
A lot of vendor people, when they meet me, they think I'm vendor because Denga's quite a very common surname among vendor people.
Okay, there you go. So you had nothing to do with the VBS scandal.
No, absolutely nothing.
I'm just checking. This is an investigative journalism program. We got to be careful out there. Okay, so we've talked about the state of disaster. It's technically over, but it's not. It's just the beginning. So don't get excited, folks. And by the way, once again, ladies and gentlemen, go to Dear SA. Lodge your complaint, contact your local municipal councilor, contact the provincial legislature, contact the national government especially, inundate their phone lines, make their phone lines melt. Make their inboxes be jammed and the servers crash. Do whatever you can to express your disenchantment and anger about all the things. Folks, we've uncovered a few things or talked about a few things here that weren't discussed in the public. And certainly Cyril was it's only 3 changes we're going to keep. You must wear a mask, wear a mask, and in no gatherings, and the Sasagrat will continue. And all will be wonderful because we, in our action, we consulted our Sangomas and traditional healers, and we determined that we saved so many lives in South Africa through the lockdown. Well, not Collins Kosa and 11 other black South Africans whom you murdered in the townships. Anyway, but the point is that I love how Cyril took a victory lap for, reducing the number of fatalities and guiding and ushering South Africa through this tragic time. When my position, ever since they started this, I'd say about 60 days into it, is that, in fact, the ANC has done everything wrong-headed and caused far more carnage and far more deaths and made the situation far worse, especially economically, than was even necessary. If they'd done nothing, South Africa would be infinitely better off. Thoughts?
Yeah, strategic communication 101. It's basically professional spin. He's more than happy to give out stats about what him or the government or the ruling party has supposedly done, but notice how he'll always omit the stats that actually matter. He'll always mention, the other day, not this past one, but his previous address, where he basically said that they are looking at what other countries are doing in response to the pandemic. Even when he says a statement like that, notice how he doesn't tell you which countries they are looking at. So it's never about the specifics. The only time he becomes specific is when he's basically giving us, I'd say giving us pseudo statistics that put him in good light or put the government in good light. But where they fail, they struggle to, they don't even struggle. They don't at all communicate that. And an example is something like that unemployment rate, something like the number of people murdered by police during lockdown. You'll never hear a government report on that. And of course, you'll never hear the media report on that as well. But as soon as there's, a quote unquote noticeable number of daily deaths because of a particular disease, of course, it's going to be front page headline news. And of course, the president is going to make it a heading point in his address. But on other things, dead quiet. So yeah, they're very selective with the information that they share, and especially the president first and foremost. And it just goes to show that there is somewhat, I'd say, controlled messaging around everything. He knows that a hell of a lot of people are actually watching his presidential addresses. And so, I don't blame him for trying to use the opportunity to paint himself and his government in positive light, of course. But again, as someone who's, I'd like to believe I'm more objective than most, give us all the information. Don't tell us you're talking to scientists. Tell us who are these scientists. Don't tell us you're looking at what other countries are doing. Which are these other countries? Don't tell us that studies have shown XYZ. What is the study that is showing XYZ?
And what's a control group? Is it 2 or 20,000?
Yeah, exactly. Give me the actual specifics. And I make this example quite a lot. To say, I don't like how it's assumed that only the experts of the experts conducted by the states can actually crunch some numbers. I can crunch the numbers too, So instead of giving us or, announcing the findings of a report that you commissioned, hint, hint, whoever pays for the science typically gets their way with the findings, of course. But yeah, instead of reporting on the findings, why don't you publish the raw data and let other people at home or in other organizations, etc. Why don't you let them actually run those same numbers that you're working with? Because if they were really truthful, they'd come to the same, if not similar conclusions, right? But they don't do that. They just want to read us from the bottom of the page where the findings are, instead of actually giving us access to this mountain trove of data that they claim to have, because they know it's not going to be pretty. And they know that once someone objectively looks at it, they'll draw their own conclusions, which doesn't exactly align with what's been told to us by the national TV.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on there, and it's it's sad, but it's so true. And speaking of not telling people the details, Dumo, did you see that the SANDF can't deploy strategically or operationally to Cabo Delgado? They can't replace their vehicles up there. They can't get supplies in. So quietly, they contracted with an Illusion 76 flying out of Dubai, I presume probably by Ukrainian or Russian pilots. I'm not sure who, but they're flying South African forces up there. And they can't continue the flights because there's no money left. It's the end of the fiscal year. So the South African National Defense Force, which was the SADF, which deployed Ratels and Oliphants and helicopters and Vulcans and all these ancient piece of equipment to Angola, and in 1975 nearly captured the capital until they finally pulled back. But they repeatedly deployed, they sent Daphne submarines off the coast of Tanzania, sending special forces operators off. Now they can't even fly any of their equipment from South Africa to Cabo Delgado to be part of the SADC mission up there. It's really sad, but it's just another example of the failures of the ANC, 3 decades of rule, and the SANDF is a sick joke in most aspects.
Yeah, just like the police, we don't have an army. Simple as that, guys. So, I mean, if someone wants to invade our country, well, now they got good evidence to show that, hey, these guys actually don't have much to actually assist them. So maybe Putin actually is wasting his time in Russia, in Ukraine, to be honest. But it's sad. It's really, really sad that, now if I say we were so good back in the day, they're going to say I'm being an apartheid apologist.
Right.
No,
right.
I'm not. I'm not trying to be an apartheid apologist. But
Maybe
look,
you're just a
on,
white
man.
supremacist. I don't know.
But on the real, those things are key. Because as a libertarian, I'll even say that the only thing that the state should manage is the army and the police force and the justice system. Bare minimum. Actually, that should be the max. For me, that's the maximum, actually, not even. But if minimum, the army. You should have an army, protect the borders and stuff like that. But we can't even help Mozambique. And I'm pretty sure that in capital, what is it? What's this place?
Cabo Delgado. Cabo Delgado.
And I'm pretty sure that the opposition that is there, they are probably better funded than the South African the defense force in South Africa, and they probably can get equipment better than South Africa.
Well, that's
black markets.
In most circumstances, yeah, that would be a fair assumption. But what's actually happening in Cabo Delgado is it's mostly a bunch of thugs who falsely claim they're part of ISIS and Al Qaeda to get international attention, to try to get money. They're not really. They have no communication with those people. And of course, U.S. State Department says they are, so that we can get involved. Oh, they're part of ISIS. It's there's no evidence of that whatsoever. They're just false claims, I believe. They first were being called Boko Haram because the people didn't know what else to call them. But we already have Boko Haram in Nigeria. That's why they called them that, because they didn't know what to call them. But these are really nasty ghouls. They're just vicious, disgusting criminals who hack people to death. Last year I saw a wheelbarrow where they had hacked apart black Mozambicans, just hacked their bodies apart after they murdered them, and they're picking up the body part. It's just they're sick people. And the Mozambican force, of course, are incapable of doing it. They're not concerned about it. All they were doing was hiding at the Total facility, which had private security. So the 1,000 Portuguese military were hiding there while the town was being destroyed. Anyway, it's just horrific stuff. But no, and in fact, SADC wants to take credit for turning the tide, but it was actually the Rwandans. They came in a couple weeks before SADC unilaterally and turned the tide, and they've done most of the success. Now the Mozambique government's taking credit. Oh, the FATM, which is the Portuguese acronym, the FATM has turned the tide. No. That's the Rwandans, the ones that are shooting, and your guys going along for the ride and for the rations. But anyway, no, I just thought I'd bring that up because that's another example where they cover stuff up. But let me switch before we run out of time here, guys, because I have to go at the top of the hour for Ronaldo, and I gave him some free advertising, but it looks like Nzuzo is still not here on this stream. So anyway, but let's get to the topics I want to cover. So this past week, we saw some interesting things. Is it Audrey Rautenbach was selected to be the chief executive officer of the ABSA Group, the Allied Banks to South Africa, and immediately that was attacked by the Public Investment Corporation. They were angry because the majority black board of directors selected a white man to run the company. Never mind the fact that the person that immediately preceded him was a black South African. Apparently that's not good enough. Apparently it only matters if a black South African runs the corporation. Now, whether the person's qualified or not, I guess really isn't germane, or that's a secondary concern for them. So my view, this is race hustling of the highest order, because their priority is not services to shareholders or services to the public. Their priority is transformation. Now, I submit to you that after 3 decades, if the ANC hasn't achieved the degree of transformation they're seeking, there's probably a bigger reason for it than white monopoly capital or racism. Now that happened, and let me add a couple more in here before we get you guys' responses. Then we had that was on the 1st of April. On the 4th of April, the Black Management Forum has also piped in, and it is dismayed that this runs counter to transformation. So what is transformation? My question is this: is transformation the exclusion of white, colored, and Indians from all aspects of leadership in all segments of society? Is that what transformation is? Because I think that's what their intent is. And if that's the intent, how is that equitable and just? That's not equitable and just. That's excluding a segment of the population. So, and this game of, 10 and 20%, that's also stupid. Pick the best people for the job. And if people aren't best qualified for it, put them in positions where they can develop those skills. So those two organizations I'm calling race hustlers. And then this week, South Africans and people around the world are suffering, especially the poor, from rising energy costs. And what does the Fuel Retailers Association do? They come out and complain because the government has talked about deregulating the cost of fuel. Now, they're not going to do it properly and just let it float on the marketplace. They've got a little scheme, which is what the ANC always does. But the issue of deregulation, they oppose it on the basis that after 28 years, only 20% of petrol stations are owned by majority black South Africans. And this will be something that works against independent ownership by black owners because the margins will be too low. Well, number one with that issue, I take great offense to it. If I was a black petrol station owner in South Africa and you thought I'm too stupid to make money because the margins are lower, then I would take great offense to that. I mean, I can provide better service with my fuel attendants. I can have friendlier service. I can have better hours. I can have better goods in the store to draw you in, put some advertising. I can do all kinds of things if I'm a black South African to get your business to come in my door. The lower margins, unless a company is illegally selling fuel below market cost to drive competition out, which is a monopolistic practice, that can be stopped legally. Unless that's happening, who cares what the margins are? They're always low in petrol stations. It's not about what you sell at the pump. It's about what you sell when people walk in and impulse buy crisp or a soft drink or something like that. That's where the petrol stations make their money all over the world, not on selling fuel. The money made in selling fuel is made by the producers, the distributors, and refiners, not by the retailers. Anyway, so I see the Fuel Retailer Association, their concern is about transformation, and they're using this as an excuse to keep the price under government control, which will continue to make South Africans suffer by paying higher than necessary fuel cost. And two things on fuel. This is unrelated to that, but take the entire levy off of fuel and the price drops to 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 rand per liter, and you have immediate relief for people who take combis every day to get to work, taxis, buses, and people trying to get to and from the shop. And so, okay, so that was a lot, guys. I'll start with Koketso. Any response or thoughts to my point of calling the Public Investment Corporation, the Black Management Forum, race hustlers, and then the Fuel Retailers Association? Or if you want to pipe in the fuel, any thoughts on that, Koketso?
Yeah, I'm with you in full agreement. We actually spoke about this at Manpatria this past Monday, actually.
Go back and watch it, guys. Go back and watch that stream.
Yeah, go back and watch that. You'll get much of my views on what I personally think about the Black Management Forum. Useless, toothless, racists. This is all basically, they're asking for legalized racism to be front and foremost over anything and everything. So, yeah, it's got to be said here that, there are people who they don't want the business that is ABSA, which is a retail bank. They don't want the business to flourish. Whether the business does well is irrelevant to them. And I can tell you now, as a business major from school, everyone knows this is from 101 here, where the reason a business exists is to generate a profit for its shareholders. It's not to create an equitable environment. It's not to correct the injustices of the past. It's got none of that. The reason a business exists is to generate a profit for its shareholders. That's the number one reason, followed closely by to remain a going concern. So these people aren't concerned with that. They don't care about the profitability of the business or whether it can remain a going concern. And on that second point, go look at the South African Airways as a prime example, or even Eskom, which is also a listed company, as another prime example. They're not concerned about the company being a going concern because they'd rather have a scenario where the company does terribly financially and then goes to the government with a begging bowl in hand to ask for a bailout of some sort. And then, of course, the conversation quickly becomes why this business needs to be saved because it is at the forefront of black transformation. So they're not concerned about a business doing well. And in the marketplace, if your business doesn't do well, then it's for the benefit of everyone, yourself included, that the business fails and folds. It should fail and fold so that there can be lessons learned, firstly by yourself, but also by others who are in the similar space on what not to do. Secondly, so that excellence can actually endure. If you go to a baker, if there's two bakeries on a street, for example, and one is basically baking making poor produce, you want him to fail, so that the guy down the road who's actually making excellent scones, cakes, etc., so that he succeeds. Who do you want to buy from at the end of the day? You want to buy the best tasting, you want to buy the best tasting goods from the best bakery, and all others must basically step aside. So everything that you buy can be of a satisfactory standard. Also, while at the same time, you want the bad products to actually fail so that those who make good products know what not to experiment with, what not to do, and how to not make their existing products any worse than they may already be. That's how the market works. But people who have race first and foremost, they don't see things like that. They are more concerned with seeing black faces at the management level, even if those black faces are running the business to the ground. That's the first point. The second point is, when you look at the profile of the guy, I forget his name now, the guy who's been appointed the CEO.
Ari Rautenbach.
Yeah, Rautenbach, he's got quite the credentials. He's been in the business for years, for decades. He's been there longer than, the age of most kids.
Yep.
So he knows the business inside and out. He's worked his way up. He's got the requisite academic qualifications. So if you're a shareholder in there, black or white, and you're interested in having the best man for the job so that you can actually draw a return on your investment, of course you want a guy like that in there. But the PIC doesn't seem to work like that. They are quite a large shareholder in there. You'd expect them to have the kind of thinking that says, how can we get the most money out of our shareholding in ABSA? They're more concerned, however, about the skin color of something. So it's quite disappointing to see that the PIC isn't interested in actually growing the pie here. What they just want is to be an avenue of transformation, etc. But transformation is racist because it exclusively excludes those who don't meet the criteria and tells them that you are not allowed to participate at certain levels of the economy. And for me, that's racist. That's exactly what the apartheid government did when they told black people that, in fact, you don't even deserve a certain level of education either, because you will never be anything bigger than what we tell you to be. So it's the exact same kind of thinking, but they just want to reverse the racism this time around to basically spite the injustices of the past, while someone like me, who was born in 1991 and doesn't have a lived experience of what it's like to, walk through a street and be told it's for whites only. They want to actually introduce this kind of a lifestyle to someone like me, and that's not exactly what I want. I just want to live in a society where those who are good at what they do are compensated for what they do, and that we should all live in a meritocracy so that excellence can actually thrive, and that's how we all become better for it. But they don't want to do that. It's quite racist. Very quickly on what's happening with energy and with our local energy sector, that is. Look, it's a breakdown of meritocracy, like I said. The black individuals who are petrol pump station owners, who, in spite of the circumstances, may happen to have reached some level of success, they typically tend to do that without any government intervention. You don't hear of government investing large amounts of money into these individuals for them to start a petrol pump business. Instead, they get loans from banks, etc. So now you have people who can't imagine life without the thieving hand of the government propping them up. You have they can't imagine life without that, and that's why they are absolutely terrified of losing out on that on that pillar to stand on. While those who are actually good at what they do, black or white, actually go ahead and succeed, or potentially even succeed even further without any government intervention to introduce new obstacles to their business. That's exactly where we are, and it's across the board, not just with this industry, but even something as basic as athletics, South Africa. You have people who are terrible at their job, but they won't step aside and let younger people who are more capable, who've got greater vision, who have skin in the game, because, we'll still be here in 30, 40 years' time. They don't want people like us going in there and making the requisite changes so that we can one day sit back at 70 years of age and tell stories to our grandchildren about how we contributed to society. Instead, you have old people sitting in there who got the job based on the color of their skin, and they don't want, they don't want to step aside because, they're basically protecting their jobs. So any notion of less regulation, etc., would make their jobs irrelevant, and that's what they're afraid of because they've got no other skills to offer to the market. And if you remove that thing, if you remove that government hand from the market, then they've got nothing to do. And a lot of them basically are too useless to even go pick up additional skills or do something as basic as a career change. I've said enough.
Well, before I go to Dumo for a response, two things about that. In fact, first off, discrimination is legitimate, and I'll explain, and exclusion is legitimate. You don't take people with no limbs to serve in the military. That's discriminatory. But it's necessary discrimination. They can't perform the function. Now, you can exclude people, but the exclusion you're talking about, that they're excluding people based on their skin pigmentation, and that is the very definition of racism, which I think is the point that Koketso is making there. All right, Dumo, let me recap here because we had a really good response there from Koketso. So the pressure's on, brother. The pressure's on. You got to top that response, or at least come close to it. So the Public Investment Corporation response to Ari Rautenbach's appointment, the Black Management Forum's response, they're the same, and then the Fuel Retailers Association, all of whom I call race hustlers, or in Koketso is just a little more straightforward. They're just racist. I'll agree with that. Thoughts? Dumo Denga, you're on.
I think starting with the PIC's comments on Ari Rautenbach's appointment, I think in that situation, I do agree that it is just race hustling at its best. I even said on the Man Patriot podcast, it's not like as if this individual has got some criminal record, or as you mentioned, like the guys who get voted in to be premiers and everything like that, having very dodgy pasts and having very questionable pasts, and some of them even being known convicted rapists, and then they get voted in. And you don't hear the PIC saying anything about that. And some would say it's outside of their mandate, but either way, the reality is that this individual who got hired by ABSA has been in the game for a very long period of time. Since 1997, that's when he joined ABSA. So that's when he joined ABSA. Never mind banking. He could have been in banking for far longer. And here he is being criticized by an organization that just wants to virtue signal. And also, as you mentioned, the board that hired him was mostly black. So it's
a majority black board. They made the right business decision, and they're being called a disappointment for not doing transformation.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. And, the PIC must just sit back. They only own 6.3% of ABSA. And also, this is not to say that black people are not good enough for the job.
Of course not.
I'm pretty sure there were black people that competed, and maybe they just were not the right fit for what they were looking for at that particular point in time. And remember,
or declined the job.
Yeah,
or that. I mean, who wants? I mean, sometimes I want that. You may be comfortable as a vice president rather than taking over, because that's a headache. You got to perform.
And and another thing is that this is, and I think the PIC is extremely racist, because if I say to them that maybe there were black people there who, could have competed but were just not the right fit, then they would say, yes, that's why we need transformation, so you can put them up there. So basically, it's the bigotry of low expectations. They're basically saying that black people, when they compete against whites, the white person will always win. They're actually literally reinforcing the very sentiment that they're supposed to be fighting against, right? It's like it's vicious. It's a viciously circular thing. Black people can't get there unless we forcefully put them there. Exactly. And that's basically, and when you say it like that, then you are reaffirming what white supremacists believe about black people, which is a dangerous belief. So I think, in my opinion, just looking at all of this, right, I think that the PIC also must understand that the CEO is there to ensure that they get the best shareholder value. So, and if he doesn't do that, and if he starts doing crazy stuff, which I don't think the CEO will do, hopefully not, I'm pretty sure this person is good for the job, he can actually get sued. So it's in their best interest that the best person for the job is actually selected as a CEO, so that the PIC can get the best return on their ownership in the company, which is really, I think, like, that's basic logic. So if ABSA hired anyone, the first question they should have asked was, is this guy good for the job? But no, they look at his skin color. And I think, for me, that just shows really whoever's speaking for the PIC clearly isn't the one that bought shares at ABSA. Just saying.
Yeah, good point.
It's not that person. So I just think for me, they just need to sit back, let ABSA make money so that they can get a bigger return on their investment. So that's the ABSA one, right? And then the one about the petrol stations and the margins and all that. Yeah, again, I think that's just more race hustling. I mean, I just feel that these individuals that are focused on having black ownership here and there and everywhere, and they're trying to do it through legislation or through forceful attempts, I just think they're wasting their time, because they're gonna get disappointed very quickly, and also at the same time they are not encouraging black people to be competitive. And I had this debate with someone who felt that black people needed to get a leg up, and I'm like, no, if you're gonna give black people a leg up just because they're black, you're telling them that that they shouldn't compete. The reality is that, yes, black people are going to have to climb higher hurdles. I understand that. But they can still be climbed. Like, I remember Walter Williams even said that if you look over time, he said, if you look at it in America, Black America, especially from slavery, he said that, there's been a lot of progress, that black people have climbed the highest hurdles in the shortest space of time. So I think black people in South Africa can do that, not because they're black, but because they're human beings, right?
Exactly. They're human beings endowed with, they're created with certain inalienable abilities. And along those lines, throw out the historic African-American or black American experience tied to slavery, but take into context the experience of Africans who've immigrated to America since 1990, which has seen a large wave of 3 to 4 million black Africans become American residents and citizens since then, overwhelmingly successful in every field they enter. I mean, there are exceptions. Some people are still taxi drivers in New York that are from Ghana, or Ethiopians in DC. They seem to love that. But I mean, I know lots of Ghanaians, lots of Nigerians, lots of West Africans who've come to America, and they're successful because they're not burdened with the culture of victimization that the American black community seems to perpetuate a lot of it. They are wildly successful, which means that there must be something to the system that makes it possible for people with drive, energy, ambition, and a work ethic to succeed regardless of their skin color. And there you go.
Right. And even black people from the Caribbean that moved to America.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing.
Well, look, Kamala Harris, her dad, the commie, they did quite well here.
Exactly. There you go. Right. So I just feel that, I just think this race thing is becoming a bit too old and a bit too stale. It's becoming this excuse that many people are starting to see right through. And the people that don't want to see right through it, a lot of them, they benefit from it. That's the only reason why, I think that's probably the only reason why they defend that view, is because they benefit from it. That's why you find that there's a lot of race hustlers in South Africa who push that nonsense view. It's not because maybe they do truly believe it, but on top of that, it benefits them. They get money. They go to schools and then they say, we got this transformation program and everything like that. And it's just ways to extract money at the end of the day. So
that's it. Exactly. For me, it's extracting privilege and wealth. That's what it is. Yep.
Exactly. So for me, they must just reject this race thing. Just let the market deal with it. For black folks out there, I'm going to say it always. I'm not saying that they're not pulling up their socks, but you got to up your game. If you want to be the best, you got to up your game. Not to say that they're not upping their game, but if you want to do that, you have to up your game, and that is it. Don't rely on handouts. Don't rely on on people pushing victimhood. You got to play the game. Simple as that. And if you play it well, you're gonna win.
Well, and I say that to all folks, regardless of their skin hue, Indian, colored, white, black. Yep. You want to succeed. You got to try harder than most everybody else. The cream rises to the top for a reason. And if you want to be part of the cream, you can rise to the top. It's all there. I did want to do one more thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to have to break off because it's time for me to go on Ronaldo. But I'm going to make point out a news article here. And I know we've talked about this before. I think Koketso and I have talked about it. But I'm going to mention this, and then I want to ask you all a very, very short, succinct, direct question about yourselves personally, if you don't mind. You don't have to answer, but I'd appreciate an answer. So the first thing is that the EFF is once again planning on marching in Western Cape wine estates of Johan Rupert, the face of white monopoly capital. Once again, they're cognitive dissonance that the majority of that man's fortune is made on the backs of Russians, Chinese, Americans, and Europeans who buy his expensive luxury goods from the Richemont Group, which is where most of his wealth is tied up in Richemont. As a shareholder in Richemont, I can attest to that. I get dividends from Richemont every year, not a lot because I don't have a lot of shares, but Johan Rupert is not fabulously wealthy because of white monopoly capital in South Africa. It may have played a role in part of his early fortune, but vast majority of his wealth is because he's applied himself overseas and made a fortune. So once again, the EFF is out race hustling. They're marching to his wine estate. I mentioned that when I asked your question, ask the question of each of you, if you want to address that, you're welcome to. I just wanted to share that with the audience. So the question I have for both of you is, what do you attribute to your grounding, your sense of right and wrong and sense of justice? Because I think that all three of us share pretty much the same view of what's right and what's wrong and how people should be treated based on the content of the character and what they put into skin into the game. That's what matters. Not on their origins, not on what their granddaddy did, not on what their parents did or didn't do. I think all three of us agree that the individual is the individual. That doesn't mean family's not important, and that's why I'm asking the question. What do you attribute to? Is it because you had good parentage? You had parents that raised you well? You had good circumstances? Were you just very fortunate circumstances? Because I certainly didn't have great circumstances that led me to this place where I'm in life. I had to overcome a lot of adversity to get here. But let me start with Dumo real quick. What do you attribute it to? Is it? I suspect it's you had two parents who loved you and raised you properly, and I could be wrong about that. And faith might have been a part of that. It might not have been a part of it. If it is or it isn't, really isn't a big deal. But I'm just curious, why do you guys think you reached the stage in life where you're such responsible young men? I'm just Dumo.
Yeah, the parenting, faith. I mean, a strong sense of morality as well.
Okay.
I think the problem is that a lot of people, the morality that's being taught now, especially like with the EFF and stuff like that, it's the wrong sense of morality. And I think that, given that, I think that probably what has helped me out is have that strong sense of morality, good parents that reinforce it all the time, and so that when you get into adulthood, you're pretty much set on your way. That's
cool.
what I think.
No, I asked because I know someone in Africa who turned it into a noun into a verb, and they call it adulting, saying adulting is hard. So adulting can be hard in the modern world. Koketso, your thoughts?
Yeah, very similar. Again, I grew up with two parents, raised by both parents as well. Yeah, and maybe for me, I have a biblical worldview. So you have to go all the way back to the book of Genesis, where Adam is charged as a man to do man things. What it basically alludes to is that, look, no one is coming. As a man, there's much that is expected of you. So you got to get up off your butt and, go and work hard. That is your charge as a man. So if you just apply those very basic principles, you end up being able to pretty much stand on your own in, I'd say, most parts of life, while at the same time not making silly mistakes like, abandoning your family, starting your family when you shouldn't, that sort of thing. So I think it's got to do for me with my biblical worldview and my biblical upbringing with two parents.
Well, Koketso, I sort of knew that already because I've interviewed on the program before, just you. I had you come on. We did this conversation. We talked about the importance of faith in your family. But I thought it was important for people new or haven't heard the conversation before to understand how you guys get so well grounded. I mean, compare your worldview to that of Julius Malema or a few other people in South Africa, and you gotta scratch your head about it. But we know how people come up with different worldviews. So I just want to get that. Guys, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your appearing again. It was great to do Nako. We talked about doing it fortnightly, but that hasn't worked out so well. So we'll do it next time we can. I'll be consulting at the War College starting next week. I'll be available Wednesday next week if you all happen to want to do this again. But the next 2 Wednesdays after, I'm going to be tied up. But anyway, so I'm going to ask you to put a little peer pressure on Nzuzo and get him to come on the show. He can stop getting free publicity. No, just kidding. But put a little peer pressure on him, get him to show up. But thanks a lot, gentlemen. Ke aloha. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye, Donkey. It's always great to see you. Folks, check out Man Patriot. It's a fantastic conversation. These guys do a great job. And I don't want to cut you guys short, but I got to end it right here. So thanks a lot, guys. You all take care, okay? All right, I'll let you guys drop off and I'll wrap up the stream, okay? Cheers. All right, folks, that's Nako, the Call of Africa. That was Dumo Denga and Koketso Retsane, and you see they're professionals. They know how to end it. They left the Zoom session perfectly in right time. I'm on Wednesdays with the Colonel right now on Ronaldo. It's time for me to go. I'll see you on that side, and then afterwards I'll be covering the Bulls versus Western Province on Rugby Ascendant. Thanks a lot, everybody. Really do appreciate your support for the channel. Take care, and we'll see you on Ronaldo in a moment.